Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. I learn from every one of my guests, and I think I'm going to learn quite a bit in this one. I'm a miracle man. I believe in miracles. Now, David here, I don't know if he believes in them or not, but he has some ways to justify them, I think, in his book. He wrote a book called The Improbability Principle: Why Coincidences, Miracles, and Rare Events Happen Every Day. So thank you so much for being here, David Hand.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, what is the genesis behind this? I think you're a math guy, I would think. And so maybe you're able to break it all down to numbers. But from my background, I believe there are no coincidences. I have a Christian background. I'm a believer. And I think that when the things happen, I'm like, there's got to be a reason. And that's how I chalk it up. But what do you say about that? Why did you write this book?
Right. You're right. I am a maths guy. And in particular, I'm a statistician. So that means I'm interested and understand probability and chance. And like everybody else, when a rare event happens, a coincidence occurs to me, something unusual, I'm on holiday in Paris and I bump into my neighbor or something like that, I think, wow, isn't that extraordinary? Is there some sort of, if you like, supernatural explanation for it? Is there a reason for it? What has led that to happen? What's the probability of it? It must be a 1 in a million chance event. But what I then did was begin to look at exactly as you say, look at the math behind it and realize that you should expect that sort of thing to happen all the time. These things, you don't have to resort to a non-scientific explanation. You can explain those sorts of events, coincidences, extremely rare occurrences in terms of the basic laws of probability. And in fact, that's what I've done in my book, The Improbability Principle. I've taken the basic laws of probability and, if you like, flipped them on their head and looked at them from a different perspective. I called that the improbability principle, but in fact, it's a bunch of 5 laws really, but it's which sort of intertwine, form a braid, which I call in general the improbability principle, and it explains why you should expect strange events, coincidences like that to occur. You don't need a non-scientific explanation.
Great. So I have read a lot about Brian Tracy. Are you a Brian Tracy fan? Have you ever heard of him? He's a motivational speaker. He has a couple different books out there, but does that ring a bell at all?
I'm afraid I haven't heard of him, no.
Well, in one of his speeches, he talks about the law of numbers, and it basically is that there's a compounding factor to anybody who's trying to produce anything. So individuals who make it big usually have done so much in the background that it's like the iceberg, right? Nobody sees it until eventually so much is built up, and then it produces great results. But it takes hours, and it takes a lot of losses, and it takes a lot of mistakes, and nobody accounts for that. And so when people make it, they say, oh, he got lucky. Well, if you produce new ideas and you keep creating, the numbers are on your side. It's one of them is going to work. Something's going to click.
That's absolutely right, in the sense that if you get out there and do lots of things and meet lots of people and give yourself lots of opportunities to have good outcomes, then you're increasing your chance of having a good outcome. So in that sense, he's absolutely right. If you just stay at home and don't meet anybody and don't do anything, your chance of getting lucky is, the chance of getting a wonderful job, for example, is basically almost zero because you're not giving yourself the opportunities. But if you go out and do lots of job interviews and meet lots of people and learn lots of things, so you've got lots of skills, you're going to you're increasing your chance of getting lucky. So he's right in that sense. Yeah.
And I think that you talk about, you say you have 5 laws. And maybe if you can break 1, 2, or 3 of those down, so people listening can use these laws to their advantage. Personally, okay. I am a shoot first and then aim second, right? Like that's the way I look at it. That has served me very well. Now, it was a struggle in the beginning, but there's a muscle that was built up where I say, you know what? We don't need to be perfect. We'll figure it out. But I have this inside of me where I'm like, you know what? I need to have the numbers on my side for the business to work, right? 1,000 contacts mean nothing, but if I serve 1,000 people, eventually 300 of them will become my tribe members, and then we can do wonders together. So numbers are crucial to business. How would you say the numbers are in favor of anybody, and what are the laws?
Yeah, you're absolutely right again. One of the 5 laws of the braid, which is the improbability principle, is the law of truly large numbers. Now, I should make a parenthetical remark here. In statistics, there's something called the law of large numbers. And this says that if you repeat something a large number of times, the number of successes will converge to a particular value. The law of truly large numbers is something completely different. The law of truly large numbers basically says that with a large enough number of opportunities, even an event with very tiny probability is likely to happen. So, and there are, if you play the lottery enough, you'll win, but it may take you 100 million years or something. You may have to keep.
Yeah,
but,
they are on your side eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right, and that's one of the strands of the improbability principle, the law of truly large numbers. Even an event with tiny probability of occurring is pretty well certain to occur if you keep giving it opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. So this is very closely tied to what we were talking about before. If you give yourself an opportunity, lots of opportunities to be lucky and inverted, to be successful, then the chance that you will be successful eventually is high. Whereas if you give yourself no chances or very few chances, obviously it's very low.
Well, I'm continuing. And I just think of what you're saying is that consistency is the name of the game. And I think with anything, it's not what you can do today. It's what can you do today and every day for the next 5 years. It's going to make you a winner potentially, right? That's the way I look at it. So consistency, those who lack it are going to be punished by it, right?
Yeah.
Punished by the world. Those who accept it and use it will be rewarded. So this, and how does this really transcend every industry, every part of your life? I would assume that, your body, your health, like it's not what you put in your body today, it's what you put in your body every day. And then the exercise and it's everything. It's how you treat your partner, your spouse, your allies today and every day. Consistency usually builds a strong temple.
Consistency and many opportunities. There's an old saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
I love that phrase. Yeah.
So,
yeah. So it's pretty much, it transcends every part of your life. And, okay, so that's one law. Give me another one.
Another law is the law of selection. And this basically says that there are different ways of phrasing it, but one way is that you can make things as likely as you want if you choose after the event. And this is where a lot of people think, well, that's an incredibly unlikely event, isn't it? But when you actually look at the bigger context, you see it's not so unlikely. I'll give you a little example, a trivial example, and I'll give you more serious examples later, but a trivial example. When I was, let's take 2 examples. The classic one is what's called the Texas sharpshooter, and you may be familiar with this. You're walking down a country lane and you come across a barn, and on the side of the barn there's lots of painted targets with an arrow sticking in each one, and you think, sticking in the bullseye of each target, and you think, wow, this guy is a really hot archer. And then you carry on walking, and you walk past the barn, you look back on the other side, and you see on that side there are a lot of arrows sticking in the side of the barn, and the guy's painting targets round the arrows. He's choosing his data afterwards. Let me give you another example from when I was a kid. When I was a child, I was very impressed by how food producers could produce jars of whole walnuts. When I tried to crack a walnut with nut crackers, I'd gradually increase the pressure and increase it, and then crack, and I'd end up with bits of broken shell and walnut all over the floor. But clearly, food producers could do it right. They could crack the thing without cracking the shell, without cracking the walnut. But then I discovered they were no better than me. About 1 out of 10 times they'd manage it. But what they did, every time they managed to get a whole walnut, they'd put it in a jar, and when the jar was full, they'd stick a label, whole walnuts. And all the bits of walnut from the 9 out of 10 times they failed, they stick in a jar labeled walnut pieces. And I only ever saw the jars labeled whole walnuts. So they were making it look to me as if the chance of them being able to produce whole walnuts was one. They were certain to be able to do it. But in fact, because they were choosing after the event, so I was being misled.
It's interesting. So,
Law of selection.
so that right there can be used. I mean, you just got to be aware of it, because as a business owner, most of my audience, I would say, is the average entrepreneur looking to start a business or has one. When you see somebody who does something magnificent, it's most likely you're only seeing that one walnut, right? The whole walnut, rather than the 100 that are failing. So it's selection on their part as a marketer to only show you certain aspects, and just being aware of it. Number one, that makes you more astute and probably smarter, but also you can use that to your advantage as a marketer and as a business owner yourself, right?
Yeah, you can. And yeah, you absolutely have to be alert for this. Someone is presenting me an amazing success story, and they clearly did succeed. But are there another 100 cases where they didn't succeed? And, do I need to take that into account? I might say, look, I've got a video record of me throwing a die and getting 10 sixes in a row. And you might, I can show you the video record. I can throw a die and get 10 sixes in a row. What I'm not showing you is that 5,000 times I threw the die beforehand and didn't get 10 sixes in the row. I'm not showing you all those failed attempts. I'm just selecting one. So this is the law of selection. And it can occur deliberately, like the business example, but it can also occur sort of accidentally, just because one doesn't notice, one isn't aware, or one, if you like, isn't suspicious about maybe this, I'm not seeing all of the data kind of thing.
When you were writing this book, were you researching some of the most, I guess, say, successful people out there, and you noticed that they didn't have an IQ that was far superior than the average person? It was more so that they just took more chances. They risked more whenever the timing was right. And there's a great phrase out there. It's not time in the market. It's not timing the market. It's time in the market.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so crucial, because Warren Buffett did not care about timing the dollar going down in a stock price. He was thinking about long term. And as long as he's in the game longer than the average person, he's going to reap the rewards. So do you see that the average successful person out there is that they're willing to take the chance and they're willing to stay longer than the average person?
That's absolutely right. And there's another aspect to this. There are more average people than, if you like, very clever people. And, the average people sometimes get lucky, sometimes don't. If you've got 10 times as many of them, there's a good chance that they will outscore the very clever person or whatever. So when you look at the top scoring person, there's quite a good chance it will be the sort of average person, as it were.
Well, how does this factor in when it comes to significant people entering your life? And maybe this is, and I'm starting to see how it all kind of connects, but certain people have entered my life at the right time, and I was ready. But it wasn't that they just entered my life. It was that I read the book that they recommended. It was, I went to that event and I met that person. So there's still that action that I had to take. Is it the fact that many opportunities are coming by you, and the only time that you're able to capitalize on them is if you spot the opportunity and you know how it's going to catapult you to the next level, which means you need to have this clarity of where you're going in life for you to understand which boat to get on, and then the fact of you actually having to take the step to get on that boat. So there's really not that much luck involved if you understand how the dots connect, and without doing anything, that's when the dots will never connect.
Yeah. Yes, you have to do something, or there's no chance of the dots connecting. You're absolutely right. But I think there's also an element of the law of selection here. There may be other potential opportunities you grabbed which didn't turn out well. And of course, they just fade away. Why would you remember those? The ones you remember are the ones which led you on to something wonderful, as it were. So there's also this sort of selection thing. You might grasp 10 opportunities, and maybe only one of them leads you on to make a vast fortune or whatever it is. That's the one you're going to remember. And there's a famous American psychic. There was an famous American psychic, Jean Dixon. I don't know if you've ever
Don't
heard
know
of
that
her.
name.
She made lots of predictions. She predicted that when he was elected, that President Kennedy would die in office. And she made lots of other predictions which came true. But what she also did was make lots of a much larger number of other predictions which didn't come true. But of course, after the fact, she doesn't draw your attention to those. She draws your attention to the ones which happened.
Mm-hmm.
And this may, I mean, this is one of the ways that psychics work. They sort of make lots of predictions, law of truly large numbers, and draw your attention to the ones which come true. And of course, those are the ones you're going to notice anyway. Why would you notice the ones which didn't happen? And so it looks, and that's the law of selection, of course. And so put those two laws together, and we're starting to build the braid of the improbability principle. Any of the 5 laws by itself can produce apparently extraordinary, unlikely coincidences. But when they come together, you get really at something quite amazing.
Well, there are people who are going to listen to this, and I think I'm on the side of this too, that says there's a higher power, there's a God that's up there,
Okay.
or maybe there's somebody who passed away who's protecting you, a guardian angel. Now, I believe I have a guardian angel out there. So the other month, and it was a while ago, my mom passed away, okay? And right when my mom passed away, 2 days later, I'm driving in my car. It's my dream car. It's a Dodge Viper. I make a right out of my parents' plan, and I see this deer standing there. It's a weird spot for this deer to be standing there. So I slow down, and I slow down 3 seconds maybe, and the deer keeps going, and I'm like, "Whew, that was scary," And then I continue. I get to the stop sign, and as the stop sign that I always get to, if I was 3 seconds earlier, something bad would have really, really happened. So I got to the stop sign a little bit later than usual. I saw a car come up this road, and they blew their stop sign and went straight into the woods. Now, if I were 3 seconds earlier, my Dodge Viper's crushed. I potentially am dead. I don't know what happens.
Yeah.
In my mind, the way I justify that is my mom put that deer there to keep me from getting to that stop sign 3 seconds earlier. Now, it is amazing. So I look at that as there's no coincidence. That's something I can't explain other than the fact of maybe there's a higher power. There's some other purpose here. So what would you say when you hear me say that to you?
Okay. I would say that there are a lot of other incidences like that, which happen every day in America. For 100 of them, there were no deer, or they were 3 seconds earlier and they got hit by the car. But for many of them, they didn't. I would say that what you've described is an event such as there is an example of the law of truly large numbers. Lots of things like that happen during the course of a day in America. Some of them turn out the way you've described, many don't. I mean, Francis Bacon in the 16th century described sailors who were saved from a shipwreck. There's a classic example, and he said, it's quite extraordinary. All the sailors who were saved that we've spoken to were the ones who prayed that they would be saved. Prayer saved them. Of course, what he's not telling you about is the fact that all of the sailors who drowned also prayed to be saved. So you're seeing there's a law of selection. You're seeing a distorted aspect of things. Again, I think it's a question of taking the bigger picture.
Yeah. So perspective really does matter. And, it's funny how you say that, because when I interview people to help them out with their books, it is the whole reverse engineer. Let me look back on my life, and there you see the fork in the road, right? You see that you made the right decision, but you don't really analyze all the bad decisions that led you to that. So it's sort of like, thank God there's that one. You focus on what you deem valuable, and maybe that is subjective.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You've put it very clearly. It's called hindsight bias. You look back and you think, well, that was a good decision, and you tend to focus on that and ignore all the other things which didn't turn out. You've put it very well indeed. Yeah, yeah.
So give me another law, because this is fascinating to me. I just think that anybody listening to this can use this, right? Robert Kiyosaki, one of the great authors that changed my life, he said that 4 out of 5 businesses failed. So all I did was I reverse engineered it and I created 5 businesses. So therefore I'm going to make it. And I thought it was phenomenal to hear that, because it wasn't until my 5th business that I started to make some money.
Yeah.
And people look at me and they say, oh, he's lucky. But all I really did was I tried, I got smarter, and I never gave up, because that stick-to-itiveness is what's lacking in this world. And I think that's the key to success. So what is another law that we could maybe take
You're right.
adhere to?
Persistence, stickability, endurance, determination, get up when you're knocked down. That's absolutely right. And of course, that's a manifestation for small numbers of the law of truly large numbers. You keep going. If you keep trying, sooner or later, you'll hop above the threshold and make it. Anyway, to your question. Okay, one of the other laws is the law of the probability lever. Let's take this one. This says that slight changes can shift things a lot, can change the probability a lot. Something might have a very small chance, but if you slightly change the probability, it can switch to a big chance. And again, many examples of this. Okay, this isn't a slight change, but it illustrates the sorts of things. The chance of being killed by a lightning strike around the world is about 1 in 300,000. If you look the figures up, it's difficult to get accurate figures on this, so you'll get different numbers, but that's a sort of ballpark figure. 1 in 300,000 per year, a very small probability. But there was a man called Roy Sullivan who was repeatedly struck by lightning. He was hit 7 times by lightning strikes. His hair was burnt off, it regrew, it was burnt off again, his big toe was damaged. And anyway, 7 times. And you think, wow, what an extraordinary coincidence. He incredibly unlucky. There must be some higher power which has really got it in for him. And that would be right if he was, for example, an office worker in New York. But that 300,000 is averaged over everybody in the world. Turns out that Roy Sullivan was a park ranger. He spent all his time riding around in thunderstorms. He's so change the probabilities. And before I told you he was a park ranger, you'd think, well, 1 in 300,000 of him being killed by a lightning strike. Very low chance of being struck by lightning. But when I tell you he's a park ranger, the probabilities change. There are another classic example of this sort of thing are financial crashes. Financial crashes are very rare events. And if you read books on this sort of thing, you find that sometimes these things are described as having, 1 in a billion chance of occurring, that the stock market should have moved like that at that time. But those 1 in a billion chances are based on mathematical assumptions about shapes of probability distributions and so on. And if you change the shapes of those very slightly, in fact, if you make them more realistic, you find that 1 in a billion chance becomes 1 in 100 or something like that. So a huge change from very slight changes in the circumstances, if you like. The point is that slight changes can make highly improbable events or almost certain.
Yeah, it makes me think of some of the networking events that I'm a part of. If you hang around 5 millionaires, you're going to be the 6th, they say, right? And it's the reason why is because money's being transacted left and right. And the chance of you being invited to that opportunity and reaping the rewards goes up drastically. And so that's why they say you are the product of your environment. If you hang around 5 broke people, the chances of you staying broke are much higher, right? So
nice example. Yeah.
It's pretty wild how it's all connected. And one thing I want to get into, and maybe there's a way for you to kind of sum it up without any confusion, because I don't know how this works, but there was a study done on individuals that prove that the gut is faster than the mind. Now, individuals were given cards and they were able to say, do you think the next card is going to be higher or lower, or even predict the next card? And what they were able to show in this study was that before they were able to answer, in their blood pressure and in the way they responded physically, it signaled to them that they knew before they gave the answer, which means that the gut or the body is faster than the mind. And so what's happening there is that you are experiencing things around you and you are responding instinctively, and then your mind tries to dissect what move to make, when the gut, or you can call it intuition, is pretty spot on. So when it comes to miracles and luck, you could say, some people are more in tune with their intuition, therefore giving them a better outcome. Is that right? Is there anything you can see out there when you analyze people, that some people are just more in tune, which gives them a better chance at success?
Yeah, I think actually those are two different things. Yeah, I know of that study which shows that people make the decision before they're aware of making the decision,
Yes.
if you like. Yeah. And I think that's very interesting stuff. And I think it's exactly as you say. And the brain takes time to sort of clunk through its sort of decision-making processes, and already the decision's been made. You're right. But I don't know that I would say that that means they're more in tune with their intuition. I think intuition is more a sort of, I suppose it's a mindset, you know, the way you're used to thinking about things and how rapidly your brain can cope with problems or scenarios, situations that you've already encountered. And some people are, you know, it depends on the context. Some people are more able to do that than others.
And so whenever I was thinking of it, it made me think of Parkinson's law. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah,
Parkinson's law? And I believe the way to sum it up is that the amount of time you give yourself, that's how long it's going to take. So if you say, I'm going to take a
that's right.
year to write a book, it's going to take you a year to write a book, or then some. Or 30 days, it's going to take 30 days. But here's the other part of it. And I don't know if it's part of Parkinson's law or not. The more time you give yourself, the less chance it actually gets done. So, or the worse the decision is, because more variables enter your brain. So going back to that study, if you sit on it and you say, well, my gut's telling me this, but because of this, too many variables cloud the mind, giving you a less chance of making a good decision, which is really interesting. And I don't know if there's anything you saw that show that people who delay and procrastinate, number one, never produce, but number two, make poor decisions. Anything you can say about that?
Yeah. Parkinson's law, work expands to fill the time available.
Yes.
And the other thing is, other saying is, if you want something done, give it to a busy man.
Yeah, that's right. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, oh, this isn't urgent, I'll do it next year sometime, sort of thing. Yeah, well, by then, of course, lots of other things will have come up which are more urgent, so it gets pushed back. And yes, yeah, that's right. You don't want to give a job to something who describes the sound of deadlines rushing past. That's a sort of
Well, numbers are in your favor for everything. Whether if I'm going to become a fighter, I need to train. If I want to, get in better shape, I need to run like crazy. If I want to become a great business owner, I need to put ideas into action and just produce. But there is a situation out there that the more you do, maybe the worse results. Case in point, and this is something I've learned from people who date a lot of people, the more people you date, the less chance of actually finding a meaningful or committed relationship, they've said, right? There's studies out there that prove if you have X amount of partners, or if you've dated X amount of people, the chance of you finding a healthy marriage actually is lower. So including in that, I guess you could say, what other situations will numbers not really serve you in the end?
Yeah, oh, that's a nice example. I wonder if there's also an element of the law of selection there. Someone who dates lots and lots of people is not that committed to finding somebody that they can settle down with, for example. So now that you've described this, there's probably, I'm thinking it's equivalent to the Laffer curve in economics. There must be a sort of, if you only date one or two people, your chance of finding an ideal partner is probably small. If you date 5,000 people a year, your chance is small. There must be an optimal.
You're right. And what do you call that? The Laffer curve? Is that what it's called?
In economics, there's this thing called the Laffer curve, which says there's an optimal rate of tax. In order to maximize the revenue that the government gets, if you charge very little tax, the tax rate is very low, you won't get much tax. If your tax rate is very high, nobody's going to bother to work. So you're not going to get any tax either. There's an optimal somewhere in the middle.
It's interesting. Yeah, I guess that makes sense when it comes to the sweet spot, if you will. But you're right. When it comes to even dating, that's a great example. There probably is a sweet spot, right?
There is.
Isn't that wild?
We'll have to work on this and write a paper on
it. In your studies, was there anything that came across your desk or in your research that seemed to be totally unexplainable? Anything that really shocked you? And I look at the human being, I believe it's what, 400 million to one for one of your cells to actually make it into there's some type of crazy number to even be born. So some things are just mathematically completely against you, but it still comes to life. So anything like that really shocks you of like, wow, this is really against you, but for us to even be here, studies show that we're really lucky, or for this to even happen seems to be inexplainable.
I don't think there is. I think that everything I've encountered, you can explain it. But can I just say, go off on a slight tangent here?
Yeah.
Because you used the word wow, and I want to make this clear. Just because I think you can explain these things in terms of probability, these very unlikely events, coincidences, whatever, in terms of mathematical laws of the improbability principle, that doesn't mean I don't think they're wonderful and exciting. I also, when one of these events happens to me, I was at a conference in 2012, Royal Statistical Society conference, and I went up to the registration desk to register at the hotel, and I said, my name's David Hand, and the receptionist looked at her screen and said, but you've already registered. And I said, no, I haven't. Turned out there was another David Hand at the conference that year. And I thought, wow. And this is the point. I think, wow, isn't it exciting? And then I think about the probabilities. And yeah, there are, I gather, about 60 David Hands in the UK. So, the chance that, given the conferences I go to and so on, the chances that I bump into one, there's a reasonable chance. So, but this, so just because I can do the maths and think, yeah, I would expect this sort of thing to happen, doesn't mean it's not also tremendously exciting when it happens to me. The analogy I usually give is the rainbow. When you don't understand the physics behind a rainbow, you see one and you think, wow, isn't that exciting? Isn't that wonderful? Those amazing colors arching across the sky. But just because, and then you learn how it works, the reflection and refraction of the sunlight round raindrops, splitting them up, splitting the sunlight into colors. That doesn't make it any less wonderful. In fact, it makes it even more wonderful because of the amazing laws of physics which will produce that effect. And that's how I think about the improbability principle. Just because there are these 5 laws and one can explain these coincidences doesn't detract from the sense of wonder that you experience when you experience one of these events.
Man, yeah, it's important to keep that childlike feeling, to be excited about it when it happens. Is that what you're saying? Don't lose that feeling.
Yeah,
because
but I'm not even saying don't lose it. I'm saying it's still there. I think you won't lose it, even if you do understand the math. You'll think, this is even more wonderful because of the way these things come together.
And so what is it about this? Have you received any criticism about your book? Anything that doesn't fit well with some people? Is there any type of rebuttal against what you say? Because everything you're saying makes sense. Now, I believe, once again, I'm a spiritual guy. I believe all of this, if we're born in the likeness and image of God, we can be in control of our own destiny. We can heal our bodies if we think about it. And so this makes me think of a guy named Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you ever heard of this guy at all?
Don't think so.
Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's a natural linguistic programmer, okay?
Yeah.
And basically, thoughts become things. That's how he looks at it. And he has documented research that shows people who believe they're going to get healthy, people who are just in their mind practicing over and over and over, actually become better piano players without even touching a piano. Simply because thoughts are so powerful and people don't realize that. So when people get better, when in the hospital without any medication except for just thinking better, it's people say that's a miracle. When in reality, if let's just say you're born in the likeness and image of God and you can heal your body, he's saying you have a lot more control than you really think or people tell you. So what you're saying is very much in that alignment, maybe not like in those terms, But
I think that's
you can
right. Yeah.
control your destiny, is what you're saying, if you start to understand that mathematically, you just have to be able to use the numbers at the right time and in your favor, right?
I would say you have some control over your destiny. And getting better in the hospital, it's very clear that optimistic people are more likely to recover, do better than pessimistic people. And that's not surprising because they see, the possibilities. It's the same with going out and giving yourself lots of opportunities to succeed. You're optimistic. You think, if I try this, I might succeed. If you're pessimistic, I think, why bother to try? I'm not going to succeed. It's the same sort of thing. So I don't think you are totally in control of your own destiny, but you are to some extent. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I forget who says it. It might be Franklin or is that Einstein, but happiness or success is going from one failure to another without any loss of enthusiasm. And it makes me think of the book Man's Search for Meaning. Have you read that book at all?
I haven't. No.
Oh, it's about an individual who was in the World War II prison camps. And
All
he
right.
says that the people who survived are the ones who kept a sense of optimism, who had hope in their life.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe that does lead to a state of mind, but also the decisions they make, and they become a drag on themselves and the people around them. Therefore, they give up, and giving up usually becomes dead weight. So, optimism is tied to probably purpose. And would you say that the best chance of success in anything is if you can identify the purpose and realize that it's your moral obligation to pursue it, which gives you the greatest chance and therefore the more miracles in your life, right?
Yeah. I think identifying the purpose, being optimistic, recognizing that there is a chance that you will succeed, so it's worth trying, is the answer, as opposed to the alternative, which is recognizing that there's a chance that you'll fail, so you won't bother, which is the opposite. So yeah.
So, of the 5 laws, which one is the most prevalent in your life? Have you noticed?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't honestly think I can single out one of them. They do intertwine to form this sort of braid, and all of them come together. And as I said before, it's when they interact that really amazing things seem to happen. Yeah.
I love the content because individuals who see me now doing businesses, and I'm involved in a couple businesses, 15, 20 years ago, they would have said, that guy's a BC student. What is he going to do when it comes to business? Well, all I have is this continued optimism in creating stuff from the ground up. I just love it, right? So like
Yeah.
I'm allowed to play more games. And maybe that's it, is that I look at everything as a game. And if you just fall in love with just playing games and learning and developing and becoming better at it as time goes on,
Yeah.
eventually you distance yourself from your old self, right? And you are a different person, basically. And I think that the more you're aware of this, you just realize that, well, losing is simply giving up, period. And saying that you have no control, that's ignorant. But to say you have total control, maybe that's even just as ignorant. But you have some control, and I think people need
Exactly.
to understand that. And this book will give them some type of grasp on gaining control in their life. Is that right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And in fact, one of the later chapters of the book is how you can actually use these ideas to sort of gain control. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Because I look at it as, saying you have total control, it means I can create a business out of anything. Well, if the market doesn't really favor it, and it doesn't suit your strengths and you don't enjoy it, maybe you can't, but it's just not in the cards. So yeah,
Yeah.
I believe that the people who make it are the most resourceful. And Tony Robbins, I don't know if you're a Tony Robbins fan,
Yes,
says,
I
but
know the name.
it
Yeah.
has nothing to do with the amount of resources you have. It has to do with your resourcefulness. And maybe
Mm.
it all ties together with, if you can make a mountain out of nothing, you could do wonders anywhere you go. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
have any other books or anything that's a website to get in touch with you, a way to contact you? Because I believe you to be an amazing speaker. Do you speak on stages at
I,
places all the time?
I do sometimes, yes. Actually, I gave a commencement speech at the University of Waterloo in Canada not long ago, and it's recorded. I'll send you the link because it's about this sort of thing. It's about persisting through failure and so on. So I'll send you that link. I have another book which your listeners might be interested in called Dark Data: Why What You Don't Know Matters, and it's related to the improbability principle, but it's about misunderstanding what's going on because you're not seeing all of the data.
Ooh, dark
So,
data. When is that out or is that coming out?
no, it came out. It came out right at the start of the pandemic.
Oh,
So,
that's a great name.
uh,
It's a great
so
name for it.
yeah, and so it doesn't mention the pandemic, and all my speaking engagements were cancelled because of the pandemic. So.
You know, when I first saw this book, it made me think of there was a book that I saw Bill Gates reading years ago, and it had to do with like how to manipulate numbers. All right. There's a book that he was actually famously pictured with.
Right.
And it's basically no matter what's out there, you can manipulate data. It makes me think of the second law that you brought up of like, you know, law of selection.
Law of
It's
selection.
only what you focus on. And so when you talk about the pandemic and how many people died, they're basically saying, oh, there's a lot of people died that had it, right? Well, then if you dig enough into that, it doesn't really paint the clear picture that we all hope. So yeah, it's all about, all right, taking data, how can we use this? And then how can we manipulate the masses? And what you're saying is be wary of every piece of data without understanding the full picture, right?
Exactly. That's a nice summary of that book. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
The full picture matters. Yeah.
Dark Data and his book, guys. I recommend it. I'm going to listen to it now. I have not. I've just took a few glimpses at it, but I'm going to listen to it now that I know you personally. David Hand, The Improbability Principle: Why Coincidences, Miracles, and Rare Events Happen Every Day. It's been an honor to talk with you, sir. You're a very smart man, and I don't get to talk to statisticians every day, so it's been an honor, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure. You've asked some very interesting questions. I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you. Thanks.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.